Kadeem, I'll come back to you then. But let's talk for a minute about what we do with the 6th overall pick. Then, if we do stay there, if kind of all cards on the table that we can play, I think I'm right in thinking you're a Kyle Pitts guy.
Yeah,
you are. Talk to me about Kyle Pitts and talk to me about why we should be considering him at 6.
It's so weird. I just think if you look at not just his size, as a physical specimen, but the fact he's really, really quick. Like, someone that big should not be that quick, and he's not just like a traditional tight end. You can move him about. So the way I see the draft playing out for Miami in taking Kyle Pitts at 6, you can go and get a very good wide receiver later on, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And the way this draft class is panning out for wide receivers, there's going to be, to me anyway, genuine starters, in the 3rd and 4th round. I think even though Miami have Mike Gesicki, and I think he should get an extension, I think he's been a great tight end. The ability to come out in 12 personnel and have Mike Gesicki and Kyle Pitts, who's going to stop that? Obviously, it's all about mismatches. And they say over and over again, you don't want a linebacker on a tight end. So we're going to give you 2 tight ends. And then we're also going to have, Devontae Parker and, say, Will Fuller on the outside. Try and stop us. And I also think this is an organization which has a lot of, former New England, coaches, people in the building. And New England love 2 tight ends. They're just going to, brought in Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry. So don't get me wrong, I would, love Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith. They're all great wide receivers. But in terms of pure pass catchers, I honestly think Kyle Pitts is probably the best out of the aforementioned. And if you're getting the best pass catcher at number 6, he's also probably the 2nd best player in this draft. If we're going to say that Trevor Lawrence is the 1st, Kyle Pitts is probably the 2nd best, player there. And you should always try and pick best player available. So the best player available is a tight end, and you can go and get a, Kadarius Toney, Amani Rodgers. To me, that's a better draft class than, say, Jamar Chase at 6, and then you don't really double down at wide receiver. You probably don't get another tight end. So it's just, I'd be really, really upset if we passed on Kyle Pitts, because I can just imagine him going somewhere else and everyone just going, that should have been the pick Miami took. But again, that's just my opinion.
So it's definitely a valid one, and it's one that more and more people are starting to buy into, isn't it? I mean, we got, to be fair, I did see somebody tweet us this week and say, why would you take a tight end at 6? But I mean, just turn the tape on, man. Just turn the tape on. Go on, Lee.
Sorry, it's something I wanted to find a way to bring up at some point. It's people who say you can't take position X at position X in the draft, right? Okay, the terms I was thinking about was obviously running back, because that's where I was going with it. But let's play the tight end game, right? Would you give up the 6th overall pick for Travis Kelce?
100%.
Would you give it up for George Kittle?
100%.
Right, then you should select the guy in the draft, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts isn't my guy. I'm actually kind of cooling on him a lot, but I just don't buy into the you can't take him there because he plays X position. It's ridiculous logic to me.
I also think in terms of, we spoke earlier about you're going to have all these first round picks. You've got to pay them all. Paying a top tight end is normally cheaper than paying a top wide receiver. So if we do get Jamar Chase and he turns out to be an absolute stud, the amount of money he's going to want in 4 to 5 years might have a genuine, problem, especially if they do pay 2 up because he turns out to be an absolute stud, as opposed to, okay, Kyle Pitts is going to want a lot of money if he, balls out, but it's not going to be wide receiver money. So already there, you've made a saving to go and pay another wide receiver or something else, I guess.
Si, were you coming in there?
Yeah, interesting theories around Kyle Pitts going at 6. And I've got a slightly different theory to that, in that when they made those trades, it became apparent to me, I thought this through logically, and I think Lee might agree with me, in that their number 1 target on their draft board is not either Sewell, Chase or Pitts. It's actually either Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. The reason for that is Dolphins picking at 3 could guarantee selecting their number one choice, assuming quarterbacks go 1 and 2 in the draft, and we think they probably will, of course. The only way they could guarantee their number one target is to pick at 3. Now, arguably, Cincinnati at 5 could be also in the market for an offensive tackle, Saul, a wide receiver, Chase, or even a tight end in Pitts. So those two teams have got very, very similar needs. The Dolphins have now dropped behind Cincinnati in the pecking order, which means that they can no longer guarantee that their number one pick will be on the board at the time they get to pick at 6. Unless, of course, their number one target is actually Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. Because on the same basis that Joe Burrow is angling for Jamar Chase to be added to the Bengals roster through the draft over Smith and Waddle for obvious reasons due to their LSU connection, the same can be applied to the Dolphins with Tua and either Smith or Waddle. So the same theory applies. So pulling all of that together, and also one other thing to throw in the mix, and who knows whether this is true or not, but Pro Football Network were reporting that Tony Pauline had heard rumours that the Dolphins were not considering any player with their top pick who dropped out, which immediately rules out Sewell and Chase, of course. So again, supporting evidence to perhaps that they are not the number one target for the Dolphins. So it's kind of an interesting look at it in terms of which player is at the top of their draft board. And I think we said in our WhatsApp chat, didn't we, Lee, that we wouldn't be surprised if it was Smith or Waddle at 6.
So I can tell Lee's going to come in and go, Tony Pauline doesn't know anything because nobody knows anything.
No, I'm going to say the complete opposite, because I actually said this on last week's show, and Ollie shot me down and said he doesn't think NFL teams care as much. And I said this before. I don't think they're interested in guys that sat out. I don't think it's a Brian Flores thing to do. I know it sounds wrong to hold it against someone, but I think if it comes down to a tiebreaker and you think two players are close, I think it puts one above the other in the minds of the Dolphins front office. I'm talking very specifically about Miami here, because I don't think it's the same case for all teams. I think you can see, I've called a bit on Pitts because I've been watching some tape over the last week. I saw a couple of instances where his effort in blocking leaves something to be desired. His blocking in general is not great, but like it's the effort to do it. If you put in 100% and you're not good at it, fine. At least you're giving 100%. But sometimes they were less than full speed plays, and I don't think that's what the sort of thing would endear yourself to Brian Flores. Whereas if you watch some of the Bama tape, you'll see Smith and Waddle playing special teams. And I think it's those little things that for me make the difference. I wouldn't be upset if they take Pitts. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if they take Pitts. But if someone asked me to put my money on it, it's the two Bama guys that would be where I'm placing my bet.
You're coming in there, Kadeem.
Yeah, it's more, I think we kind of said it earlier, how nothing gets out of this front office. Everything they want to do, they kind of keep in-house. So I know I've seen a few people, Tony Pauline and others say, Miami are thinking about doing this in the draft. And the moment I see that, I think, okay, Miami are not, that's a complete lie. Because again, weeks ago, it was Miami going to get Deshaun Watson. That was a 100% guaranteed thing that was going to happen. And I think even before the legal trouble, it just didn't. Miami were like, no, we said Tua was our guy. Like, we actually said that. We haven't leaked anything. I do kind of agree about the Kyle Pitts, blocking thing. I think that's one thing that will be held against him. But at the same time, if you draft Kyle Pitts and ask him to block, you're kind of wasting his talent. And obviously, like the top tight end, your Gronks and your Kittles, they are able to block. I remember when we drafted Mike Gesicki and Adam Gates asked him to block, and everyone's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, the guy can't block. Like, it kind of just, it's not going to end well. So obviously, in my dream fantasy 2 tight end set, that kind of gives away that Miami aren't going to run, because everyone knows Gesicki and Kyle Pitts can't block. However, it could just be a case of, you're going to block, but just use your big frame. So yeah,
just get in the way.
Yeah, basically that is, you think we're going to pass, we're going to run, but just avoid kind of like running outside of the tight ends, because they're going to be on their asses sooner rather than later.
Sorry.
Just want to add, Andy, actually, to the conversation I'd started earlier. Of course, I still think there's a really good, strong possibility of a trade down from 6, as we talked about earlier, because the two outliers that we've not yet talked about in any detail are, one, the 49ers. We're all assuming that they're going to take one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks, but there's a lot of information out there, or it could be misinformation out there, that they're high on Mac Jones. And if that is their pick at number 3, and they are going to pick a quarterback at 3, because you don't give up all of that capital for a non-quarterback at that high in the draft, unless it's a running back league.
Not quite.
So I think they're going to. It's safe to say they're going to take a quarterback, you would assume, and if it's Mac Jones, then one of the top 4 logically are going to fall, and immediately phones are going to be ringing off the hook for whoever's not selected by the Niners. The other one is, of course, Atlanta. I mean, we're all assuming, or all the mocks I've seen, that Atlanta are going to take a quarterback at 4, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I was talking with a good friend of mine, Rich Wyatt, who's a big Falcons fan, and I asked him what he thought was going to happen at 4, and he says either they're going to take a quarterback at the future at 4, and they're going to sit him for the next 2 years because Matt Ryan's contract means that there's dead money tied into the Falcons for the next 2 years, or they're going to trade back for a haul of picks players and build the team around Ryan for the remainder of his career, which could be anywhere between 2 and 5 years. And the fan base, according to him, is split down the middle in terms of which way they would go. So we don't yet know for sure which way Atlanta are going. And again, if they don't take that quarterback and decide to build around Ryan, then again, the phones are going to be ringing off the hook for the Dolphins, especially, I think, to trade down a little bit more from the likes of Carolina, Denver, to name 2.
Lee, were you waving frantically to come in there?
Yeah, I completely agree that, obviously you don't give up that much unless you want a quarterback. The only other thinking is that you want to guarantee that you get the best tackle in the draft because you want to protect the guy that got hurt. Because 2 years ago, he took you to a Super Bowl. Like, all of a sudden, it's amazing how quickly a quarterback falls, isn't it? Like, he gets hurt, plays below average, and all of a sudden he's not worth absolutely anything, which is ironic because people will keep telling you that Sam Darnold has trade value. Do you know what I mean? People will tell you that Jameis Winston still deserves to be a starting quarterback. And I know you love Jameis Winston, that's why I said it. But you know what I mean? Like, he's only like 1 year removed from going to a Super Bowl, winning the NFC. What if you want to? It seems like a lot, but what if you just want to guarantee that you're going to keep him healthy? Would you be willing to have done the same last year and give up a bunch of picks to protect Tua? Most people probably would. I don't know. I just think I just think it's amazing how all of a sudden we've got like at least 5 quarterbacks going in the top 10. It's just everyone's after a quarterback and they're all great. So it's brilliant.
Mac Jones isn't great, mate. Don't convince yourself that that's the case.
If anyone saw any of the clips out the pro day today, there was some brilliant pictures on coaches' faces when he was making the overthrows. Absolutely brilliant.
Belichick wasn't happy.
Which is absolutely great. But I don't, chances are they're going for a quarterback. But just going back to what we were talking about with team building with the Dolphins and how you're going to run into the situation where you've got to pay everybody, and we all know that really your best opportunity to get to a Super Bowl is with a quarterback on a rookie contract. It kind of like talks you out of the Falcons taking a quarterback, because why would they want to waste 2 years sitting on the bench? A year is a lot, but all of a sudden you've only got 2 years before that guy's talking contract negotiation. It's you're only going to see 2 years, and then you've got to potentially pay him or pick up that 5th year option. I don't know if that's a great place to put yourself in. I think they go somewhere else.
Yeah, I can see the Falcons going wide receiver. I think they've got Julio Jones is 32. He's not around for much longer. And they're going to have to pay Calvin Ridley. And I think he's, 27, 28. So all of a sudden, your really good wide receiver group are old or like the wrong side of 30. So I think that first wide receiver goes at 4, and I think it's Jamar Chase. And I think if Jamar Chase goes at 4, I think Penei Sewell probably goes at 5. And then again, at Miami, it's do they go Kyle Pitts or do they take one of the Bama guys? Because, one of the wide receivers are gone, and Detroit have no wide receivers. So they're probably going to take a wide receiver. So while I'm a massive advocate for taking Kyle Pitts at 6, if Chase goes at 4 and the Lions are desperate to take a wide receiver. By the time Miami are back on the board, those wide receivers are gone. And I'm sure most of us here will be thinking Najee Harris at 18 or earlier. But there's probably some thinking that, you know, do you go Kyle Pitts at 6, move up to get Jalen Waddle before he goes to Devonta Smith, and then jump back into the third to get Najee Harris and just go completely crazy in the first round?
The beauty of collecting so many picks is that these are all legitimate options. That's why you build this sort of chest of picks to play with.
Just imagine the hype as well. It might not even work, but just imagine the hype we'd have pre-season. That'd be insane. Si, were you coming in there, mate?
Yeah, just one thing to add on Pitts. Didn't Tony Gonzalez used to play for the Falcons? So they're used to having an all-pro tight end in that organisation. So they've clearly got maybe Kyle Pitts in mind to kind of follow in Gonzalez's footsteps, perhaps, and you pair him up with Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, and suddenly they're looking a lot better, aren't they?
Sorry, I've got one more question. I know we keep going on about Kyle Pitts, but you know, but it's a big talking point because a lot of people do want him. If Kyle Pitts is the second best receiver or the best receiver in the draft, and he's a matchup nightmare, and he doesn't block very well, why doesn't he play receiver?
That's a good point.
Because receivers generally get drafted higher. They generally get paid more. What's the benefit to him being a tight end? And I'm not trying to be argumentative, but it's a kind of serious question that's kind of dawned on me over the last few days. It would seem like it was in his interest to be a wide receiver.
You're completely right as well. And obviously, there's that weird fact that he wasn't eligible to be the best tight end in the country in college football in 2019 because he played too many snaps at wide receiver, like in wide receiver position, so he became ineligible to get that award. So there's that kind of stuff there as well. I mean, I just think it's the kind of it's his size and power as well. I think he could be like brought into you know, he could be trained to block a little bit better, and it'd be great in line if he's got that frame to do so, hasn't he? But yeah, it's an interesting point, and there's no reason why he couldn't line up on the outside, is there? So yeah, definitely one to keep in mind.
It definitely feels like that could become an issue if wherever he goes when he's playing really well. That's going to be one of those stories that comes out in the fourth year. I want to be paid like a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Even if he's still playing tight end, you know, because he's going to do so much of the wide receiver work as well that he's going to want that money.
That's it. Kadeem, one last question then on the kind of what we do at 6 for you. I mean, do you think there's any wild cards kind of just floating around that we're not talking about at all? I mean, I keep coming back to Micah Parsons, the Penn State linebacker who had a good pro day, absolutely huge guy, and would be like dominant at the linebacker position for us. So I also kind of wonder as well if you're kind of coming up into that space to guarantee that you get someone, and you do think maybe you need a tackle, but you've got Christian Darrisaw rated or somebody like that rated just as highly as Sewell, who's set out for the year. Do you think like maybe somebody like that could be the guy there at all?
I think Parsons' off the field issue, I think he's been accused of like bullying when he was at Penn State. I think that could turn Miami away from drafting him. Like I'm a firm believer that Miami, obviously everyone says, you know, you want players with blue chip talent. I firmly believe Miami want players with blue chip personality. I think, you know, you look at when they took Austin Jackson, I think the way Noah works, and I think Noah's background, you know, being a track athlete and stuff like that. I think is it Solomon Kinley was a lifeguard? Yeah,
I think lifeguard.
Yeah. So I think they want people who, while they're great footballers, they are also, you know, amazing people off the field. And don't get me wrong, you know, they've given second chances to Isaiah Wilson, Antonio Callaway, you know, Preston Williams. The less said about Wilson, the better. You know, but Williams is still about. So I do think that they're willing to give people a second chance. I just don't think they're willing to do it in the first round because that, you know, that pick is so valuable. And, you know, and an undrafted free agent or a guy in the 7th round with off the field issues, yeah, great. You know, it doesn't work out, is what it is. But Parsons at 6 is a bit too rich for me, which is weird because I love Parsons and I still do love Parsons. If he's ever 18, I'd be okay with that. But I think it would be old Miami regime to mess up the pick at 6. It would be like taking Dion Jordan, all over again, or missing out on TJ Watt because you want to take Charles Harris. I just think 6 to me has to be either Panay Sewell or one of these pass catchers.
I agree to a certain extent, actually. And if in the past, growing up as a Dolphins fan, you always knew that they were going to mess up their first round pick. It became a bit of a laughing stock. You don't get that sense of impression with this front office at all. Even going back to last year, everyone wanted Tua, and Tua it was. And you don't get the sense that they're screwing this up. Just because of what's happened with these trades, they're getting it right. And you have to trust them to get it right again on draft day and make that blue chip pick, as you put it, Kadeem, at 6. I would be very surprised if they don't go with an elite wide receiver or tight end, in inverted commas, at that pick.